They say the Whaley House isn't just haunted, it's cursed. A place where tragedy left its mark and where visitors still swear they see figures that shouldn't be there, shadows moving on their own, voices echoing through empty rooms, even glimpses of the Whaley family themselves long after their time had passed. Some call it cursed, others call it the most haunted house in America. Let's step inside. Hey there, I'm May, and welcome back to the Dark Folio, your creepy little coffee break. There's just something about old houses that draws us in, isn't there? Maybe it's the history soaked into the walls, or the stories whispered through creaky floorboards. But sometimes you stumble on a house where the very ground it stands on was destined for darkness from day one. Today we're heading to sunny San Diego, California, to visit what's widely considered America's most haunted home. The Whaley House has been collecting ghost stories for over 160 years, from shadows that move on their own to voices that echo through empty rooms. Some call it cursed, others simply call it the most haunted house in America. And before we step inside, don't forget, if you love eerie folklore and haunted history, make sure to follow the Dark Folio wherever you listen. And if you're with me on YouTube, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you never miss a haunting story. Here's what I love about the Whaley House. It isn't just a relic of the past. This Victorian beauty is still standing. It's still giving tours, and it's still making believers out of skeptics. You can literally walk through the same rooms where these stories began, and maybe even add your own to the legend. Tonight, we open the ghost file on the Whaley House. The story of the Whaley House begins with Thomas Whaley, a determined entrepreneur who moved to San Diego in the mid-19th century, eager to build a life and a legacy. In 1857, he began construction on what would become his family home, a beautiful two-story brick edifice, complete with a general store, San Diego's second county courthouse, and even the city's first commercial theater. It was a beacon of progress and ambition. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something a lot of people don't know. Thomas built his dream home on top of what used to be the town gallows. Yes, you heard that right, the gallows. Between 1852 and 1853, at least 5 people were executed on this very spot. In those years, San Diego was still a rough frontier town, the kind of place where justice was swift and final. Crowds would gather on this vacant lot near the edge of town, right across from El Campo Santo Cemetery. One of those executions was of a tall man named James Yankee Jim Robinson. He was known as a horse thief who had run down to Southern California to hide out. He thought San Diego might be a fresh start. But old habits die hard. Jim teamed up with 2 other men to steal a rowboat from the bay. Not exactly the crime of the century, right? Unfortunately, Yankee Jim was also confused with another tall, lanky criminal with the same name and the same nickname. A very unfortunate coincidence. This was a rough guy, a murderer, and a horse thief. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean deeply unfair. The jury for his trial included the 2 men who actually owned the boat that they tried to steal. Yeah, you heard that right. Talk about a conflict of interest. When Jim was sentenced to death by hanging, he actually laughed at the judge. He couldn't believe that they'd execute him over a rowboat. What he didn't know was that he was being tried on another man's reputation, not a few petty crimes. Again, in these times, punishment was swift. There were no appeals, no chances to right a rather simple crime. They thought they had a murderer, and they were going to execute him, and they were going to make an example out of him. The authorities set up a makeshift gallows in the back of a wagon. As Yankee Jim stood there, a noose around his neck, he was given a quick baptism, and then they proceeded straight to the execution. But the execution was botched. No one took into account his height of 6 foot 3 or 4 inches tall, and they made the noose too long. When the wagon pulled away, Jim's feet could still just barely touch the ground. So instead of a quick drop, he slowly strangled to death for over 30 agonizing minutes. his body fighting against the rope, his feet dragging on the ground while the crowd watched. Legend claims that his last words were a defiant curse, aimed at those who condemned him. Other stories say he was so confused and talking to the crowd, thinking it was all a big joke, and that his last words were, "Am I gonna die?" Isn't that just a horrible story? Completely unfair, unjust, and you know what? If I was Yankee Jim Robinson, I think I'd haunt that place too if it happened to me. Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying this dive into haunted history, come hang out with me on Facebook at the Dark Folio page. That's where I share even more creepy folklore, strange history, and paranormal odds and ends that don't always make it into the podcast. It's like your daily dose of eerie in between episodes. Get back to the episode. 3 years later, after the horrible botched execution in 1855, Thomas Whaley bought that very lot, the former gallows site. Now, was Thomas Whaley aware of the grisly history when he bought the land? Absolutely. But real estate was scarce, and Thomas was a practical businessman. He figured he could build something beautiful over something so terrible. And on May 6, 1856, he began construction on what he proclaimed would be the most handsomest, most comfortable, and convenient place in town, or within 150 miles of here. And you know what? He did. Thomas spared no expense. This is reported as the first brick house in Southern California, built with bricks from Thomas's own brickyard. We're talking mahogany and rosewood furniture, Brussels carpets, damask drapes, the works. It cost over $10,000, which in 1857 money, well, let's just say you could buy several city blocks for that price. The Whaley House is gorgeous. 2 stories of brick and wood with these beautiful arched windows and a wraparound porch. It was the finest house in San Diego at the time. The house served many purposes over the years. It was a family home, sure, but it was also a courthouse, a general store, a granary, and even the town's first theater. The Whaley family, Thomas, his wife Anna, and their children, made this their home base for decades. The first paranormal activity started almost immediately. Thomas himself wrote about hearing heavy footsteps upstairs when no one else was in the house. He described them as the footsteps of a large man wearing boots. Exactly what you would expect from a 6-foot-tall sailor like Yankee Jim. And it wasn't just Thomas hearing things. The whole family experienced it. Anna Whaley, Thomas's wife, reported doors slamming, cold spots, and the distinct feeling of being watched. Their children would refuse to sleep in certain rooms. But here's what makes the Whaley House different from your typical ghost story. This family didn't run. Oh no, they lived with it for decades. Thomas apparently even wrote in his diary, quite matter-of-factly, about the ghostly footsteps becoming part of their daily routine. Now, Yankee Jim isn't the only spirit calling the Whaley House home. Like I said before, over the years, the building served as the family residence, a general store, a courthouse, and even San Diego's first commercial theater. The house itself became a magnet for tragedy. Each era seems to have left its own ghostly residence behind. Let me walk you through some of the darker moments that soaked into those brick walls. The Whaleys moved into their new home, and for a time it was a hub of activity. Yet tragedy began to weave itself into the fabric of the house. In 1858, their infant son, Thomas Whaley Jr., succumbed to scarlet fever, dying in the house at only 18 months old. The grief was immense, and some believe his childlike spirit remains, with reports of hearing a baby crying, especially in the upstairs nursery. The Whaley House love story involves their daughter Violet. Violet fell in love with a con man, George, who only married her for her money, which she tragically found out about on their honeymoon of all times. Allegedly, he abandoned her shortly after, and she legally divorced him, but she was weighted down by shame and depression and ended her own life at only 22 years old by a mortal wound to the chest by borrowing her father's .32 caliber revolver. Visitors today report seeing a young woman in the garden area, always dressed in period clothing, always alone. Visitors and staff have also reported sensing a profound sadness, even the scent of violent perfume, or witnessing a female apparition dressed in white, often near the doorway where she passed. The family was devastated, and Anna, Violet's mother, was never quite the same afterward. And there's Anna Whaley herself. Anna herself passed away in the house in 1913 at age 80. By then, she'd lived through decades of joy and heartbreak within those walls. Her son Francis died there a year after his mother in 1914, followed by George in 1928, and the last family member, Corinne Lillian, lived in the house until her death in 1953. The spirits of the Whaley family themselves are believed to reside there. Thomas Whaley, the patriarch, has been seen, particularly in the study or on the upper landing, a commanding yet protective presence. His wife Anna Whaley, a spiritual woman who believed in the afterlife, is often experienced as a gentle maternal presence, sometimes accompanied by the scent of her favorite rose perfume. Visitors and tour guides also regularly report seeing a woman in period dress in the master bedroom and downstairs parlor. She's described as elegant, wearing a long dress, and she seems to be tending to household duties. Even in death, Anna is still taking care of her home, and sometimes visitors catch the smell of Thomas Sr.'s cigars, even though smoking hasn't been allowed in the house for decades. Visitors to the Whaley House consistently report a range of paranormal phenomena: cold spots that defy explanation, sudden inexplicable drafts, disembodied voices whispering from empty rooms, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Objects are said to move on their own, alarms are triggered without cause, and the distinct sound of footsteps or even full conversations are heard when no living person is present. Investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, with voices seemingly responding to questions asked of the unseen residents. If you love paranormal investigations, well, this place has it all. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Old house, creaky floors, California earthquakes, power surges, power of suggestion. There's got to be logical explanations for all of this, right? And you know what? There might be. The house is old. It does have settling issues, I'm sure. And San Diego can get pretty windy. Those footsteps everyone hears? Could be the house settling. The door slamming? Wind pressure. The cold spots? Well, old houses are notorious for poor insulation. But here's what gets me. The Whaley House has been investigated by everyone. Paranormal researchers, scientists, skeptics trying to debunk the stories. And while some experiences can be explained away, others, well, they can't. The house has been featured on shows like Ghost Hunters and Most Haunted Places, and even the most skeptical investigators admit that there is something unusual happening here. My favorite of these episodes is the episode of The Haunting of, featuring Regis Philbin. It's a good episode, and I'll link the YouTube video in the show notes. But in all of these different investigations, the same things happen. Electronic equipment malfunctions regularly, temperature readings spike and drop without explanation, and multiple people report the same experiences independently. Plus, the ghost activity isn't random. It follows patterns. Yankee Jim's footsteps are always heard in the same areas, always heavy boots, always upstairs. Anna's appearances are always in her domestic spaces. The baby's crying is always in the nursery. There is a consistency to these reports over more than a century and a half. We're talking about different people, different time periods, different cultural contexts, all reporting very similar experiences. If this were just people's imaginations running wild, wouldn't the stories be more varied, more dramatic? The Whaley House today stands as a designated historic landmark, and it officially opened as a museum in 1960. It draws thousands of visitors each year, many of whom are drawn not just by its history, but by its enduring reputation as one of America's most haunted houses. It's reported that the staff keeps detailed logs of paranormal reports, and the consistency is pretty remarkable. Tour guides, and these are people who spend hours in the house every single day, report that the activity seems to increase around certain times of the year. Anniversary dates are big. The date of Yankee Jim's execution, the dates of family deaths, even happy occasions like birthdays seem to stir up activity. And that's really what I think makes the Whaley House special. It's not just a haunted house, it's a family home where multiple generations lived, loved, suffered, and died. These aren't random spirits looking to scare people. These are people who are still emotionally connected to this place. But it's also a story about justice, about loss, about the way our past refuses to stay buried. Yankee Jim Robinson died for stealing a boat, a crime that today might result in a fine and community service. His death was brutal and public, and rumored to be witnessed by the very man who would profit from the land where he died. The Whaley family built their American dream on that foundation of injustice, and while they weren't responsible for Yankee Jim's death, they may have felt the haunting repercussions of buying land used as hanging grounds. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's something deeply moving about places like this. They remind us that our actions have consequences that ripple through time, that some wounds run too deep to heal, and that maybe, just maybe, death isn't always the end of the story. The Whaley House stands today as a testament to the idea that some places hold on to their past so tightly that the past becomes the present, where the shadows truly do keep their records, and those records aren't easily forgotten. If you're ever in San Diego, you can actually visit the Whaley House. It's become the perfect storm of historical preservation and paranormal tourism. You can take regular daytime tours to learn about the Victorian lifestyle and San Diego's early history, or you can attend evening ghost tours for a more atmospheric experience. Fair warning though, the evening tours book up fast, especially around Halloween. The house sits right in Old Town San Diego State Historic Park, so you're not just visiting a haunted house, you're stepping into a beautifully preserved piece of California history. This amazing historic district is full of restaurants, shops, and other historic buildings. You could easily spend a whole day there. The furnishings in the Whaley House are authentic to the period. The architecture is stunning, and even if you're not a believer in ghosts, it's absolutely worth the visit for the history alone. They even have a gift shop in the Verna House behind the main building, because nothing says, "I survived America's most haunted house," like a souvenir t-shirt. Just maybe don't go alone. Not because it's dangerous. The Whaley family spirits seem pretty benevolent, but because you're definitely going to want someone to confirm what you just heard, you smelled, or saw. Trust me on that one. So there you have it, the Whaley House, where San Diego's past refuses to stay buried. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's something undeniably compelling about a place where so many people have reported the same experiences for over a century and a half. Maybe it's just an old house with good stories. Or maybe, just maybe, some places really do hold on to the people who love them most. What do you think? If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to follow the Dark Folio wherever you listen. And if you're joining me on YouTube, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next eerie episode. For anyone who wants a deep dive, I've left full show notes, sources, and extra details linked in the episode description. And between episodes, come hang out with me on the Facebook page at the Dark Folio. I'm always sharing more creepy folklore, strange history, and paranormal curiosities there. The kind of content I know you'll love if you enjoy the show. And next week, we'll leave behind the haunted ghost tales, and we'll switch things up for a monster file. We will step into the shadow woods of New Jersey, where whispers tell of a creature born of a curse and feared for centuries. The Jersey Devil still spreads its wings, and I'll be waiting to share its stories with you. Until next time, keep your lights low and keep your curiosity sharp. Thanks for spending your coffee break with me today in the Dark Folio. If you enjoyed this little dive into the strange and unexplained, make sure to follow the show. There are so many more stories waiting in the shadows. And hey, if you've got your own encounter with the unexplained, reach out. I'd love to hear about it. You might even hear your story in a future episode. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your coffee strong, and remember the best mysteries are the ones that never quite let you go. I may keep that flashlight handy, just in case.